Welcome. This is the WP-Tonic podcast. This is our Saturday blab, and today we're talking about how best to evaluate a WordPress developer, company, or maintenance service. And what this episode is going to be about is, say you're a business owner and you need someone to work on your site or build you a new site. How do you go about choosing? It's very tricky, and a lot of people don't do this that often. So we're going to share our insight. Let me introduce our panel. First, Kim, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kim Shivler. I actually am not someone for you to hire to do development. I teach. I teach people how to build WordPress websites and online courses. I have been coding HTML since 1995. So I've got longtime chops as a developer and working with WordPress since 2012.
Awesome. Jackie.
Hey,
introduce yourself.
Yep, I'm Jackie D'Elia, Jackie D'Elia Designs. I just run my own agency, and I build websites and help customers promote their brand and drive customer engagement. So that's really what I'm focused on.
Cool.
Been in WordPress since probably 2008.
Nice.
So.
Okay. Well, I'm a newbie here. My name is John Locke. I have a small WordPress consultancy in Sacramento. Lockdown Design, and I've only been in WordPress since about 2011. So, but there you go. Before we get into today's main topic, let's talk just about two really quick stories that are in WordPress right now. And one of them is that Woo Themes, the people behind WooCommerce, they're now redirecting that URL to WooCommerce. Did everybody see this coming, or what are your thoughts on this?
I'm surprised it wasn't done years ago. They really have been known as the WooCommerce company for several years. And while, yes, they had themes that went along with the e-commerce platform, a la Canvas and Superstore and all of these other themes that were built to work with WooCommerce, I think everyone knows them as WooCommerce. I was always trying to wonder why I was explaining to students they need to go to woothemes.com to find the WooCommerce information.
Jackie?
Yeah, it was an interesting article. And actually, one of the comments in there was really right on point. It was saying, somebody named Steve wrote in there, it says, between 2006 and 2010, themes are hot, Woo themes. 2011 to 2015, plugins are hot, WooCommerce. 2016 onwards, software as a service is hot, WooCommerce Connect. So it's just a natural progression of things, where the focus is right now. And software as a service is a big focus right now too, as you kind of migrate from real plugin dependencies versus just using software as a service. Like Opt-in Monster is a good example of what they did recently. So I thought it was good. And I definitely think it's probably, the theme market is very overpopulated, and it makes more sense since most of that is, I think the reason it was purchased was for WooCommerce. So why not just have that be the place where everything lands, at least for now.
I am glad that you stated all that, Jackie, because that's exactly what I think. The theme marketplaces like 5 or 6, 7, 8 years ago were totally hot. But I think the focus in the developmental community has really shifted toward plugins, because I think themes as a business model is a lot harder to make work in 2016 than it was in 2008. And as far as Woo themes, I think most of their business really comes from WooCommerce and the extensions. I mean, WooCommerce is free, but really their business model is, extending it out and selling extensions. And I think they I'm just going to guess, and I think they generate a lot more revenue from that than they do their themes. And I think this rebranding is good, because that's what it is. It reminds me of 37 Signals rebranding to Basecamp earlier this year. And I do agree with you that software as a service is you see it happening everywhere else. You see Adobe, they don't sell the actual product. They make you buy a subscription for the Creative Cloud. with Microsoft, you don't just buy Word anymore, and you could like 5 years ago. Now you have to, subscribe. So I think a lot of things are headed that direction. Now, what do you two think about how soon are we going to see WooCommerce itself like rolled into the WordPress.com offering? And for people who don't know, that's the paid like hosted platform that Automatic has.
I don't really have any gauge on how that's going to evolve over time. It looks, from what they were saying here, 85% of the overall sales of Woo themes was just WooCommerce. So it seems like if they were going to roll all of that in, then they would be cutting off all of the activity and sales that you get for all of the .org sales that go on. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out.
That's a good point. Kim?
I'm kind of the same. I don't know. And I think that I don't even know like if it is because they're going to the WooCommerce Connect thing, if maybe that's just where the focus is going to be. I really I'm not 100% sure. Having said that, I'm not an expert on WordPress.com. I don't use it.
Well, just as somebody who ran a Yahoo store for 8 years, that's what I did from pretty much, I think, 2002 to 2010 or so. That was a really nice hosted solution. And at the time, it was a really good option if you wanted to have an online store and sell products. It managed all of your inventory, your ship. It did everything. It was really good. It's not anymore. I mean, that is not where people are going now. But it seems like, to me, a hosted e-commerce solution would be a really good destination point. I think that might make things easier. It's difficult to set up a WooCommerce site when as a self-hosted one. It is. I just did one recently. I mean, it's not, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying there's a lot of steps to it. There's a lot of things you have to do. There's a lot of extra work in it. And if you're pricing a project based on building out a site with e-commerce, you really need to be thinking about how much time you're going to be spending on the e-commerce side of it, because it may end up taking about twice as much of your time to do a site like that versus just a standard website. And
I would agree with that so much. And also, I built out several WooCommerce sites when I did custom work or did client work. It wasn't even just the time. It was by the time you went through the customer requirements and the price of all the different extensions, all of a sudden it became, $1,000 in extensions by the time they wanted shipping from this, shipping from that, and variations and all of this. It just like became multiple extensions. It became crazy. And all of a sudden I was looking at things like Shopify for people, where they could have a one place, which I think is where Automatic's going with this, right? That's kind of the competitive point, would be something like a Shopify. But it was all there for them, and they weren't worried about updates every week and everything else because of how convoluted it was to set up all those different extensions with WooCommerce.
That's the other thing, and that's a good point, Kim, is that once you have your site, somebody really needs to keep managing that. I mean, you're talking about you're managing transactions, people's credit cards, updates need to make sure they're applied. Somebody needs to test whether the updates are going to break the site. There's lots of things to do, and if you're running a pretty large site, that's all just critical stuff. It has to be done. If you're a small mom and pop online shop, it still can cause you problems. If you get an update from a plugin and it causes a problem that you don't notice right away. I mean, that's the thing. When you load something and it breaks something, you can easily go in and do a quick restore or something else. But when you don't know there's a problem, and 3 or 4 days or 5 days later, you start to realize something isn't right, that's where a lot more time is required to manage those sites. And I think a hosted solution probably makes much more sense for a mom and pop or a small business that wants to have an e-commerce site, because that's why I did it with the Yahoo store. It was not, I didn't have to do, I coded the website. I built out the website. I built out the pages, the products, did all the, the images, laid it all out. You could pretty much get free reign to do most of those things that you wanted and make it look exactly how you wanted it to look. There really weren't any themes. You basically just built it out.
Right.
But you didn't have to manage the whole back end and worry about updates and, compatibility issues and security issues and all of those other factors that go into an e-commerce site.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I know like I had an issue with with one that was a WooCommerce. And like I said, it had like 10 of the different extensions. And we came out with one of the updates and one of their own extensions broke the whole site.
So maybe that goes back to our original conversation when we first started this is, where do you see that going? And now maybe that we're chatting about it back and forth, it's starting to become more clear that probably it's going to a hosted solution for the most part. I would say that makes a lot more sense. I think, there's always going to be people that want to manage their own self-hosted solution and want to own all their content. And there are issues with building your store on somebody else's platform because they control, you're renting the land your store is built on. So, that's a concern. If you plan on growing that business later and whether or not there's transaction fees. One of the downsides on the Yahoo store that I had was, they had a pretty high transaction fee. I think it was like 1 3/4% or something like that. It was expensive once you started growing your sales, and we weren't real big. We maybe were doing like $500,000 in sales a year. So, but it adds up. Those fees add up. And it gets attractive then where you want to just go and self-host it. But then you just need to make sure you have somebody to manage it, or you're setting aside time to manage it properly.
Absolutely. I so agree with you. And also, if you're doing self-hosted, and we're talking WordPress still, because that's what we talk about here, there are pieces that a lot of people, particularly if you haven't built out a site like this before, you're not maybe on the technical side, that go even way beyond the plugins themselves, et cetera. So for example, those of us who are on the technical side understand that we have issues with the PHP mail piece of WordPress, and you need to go to a send grid or something like that. And if you don't, what happens is because I don't do services, but I do support, right? And I get phone calls. All of a sudden, their transaction alerts quit, everything else, all their emails quit coming through because they were still using that old default PHP. They're getting caught in the spam filters, and then you have to walk them through going to a SendGrid or a Mandrill or whoever they're going to use to get into an SMTP and then get those alerts coming again. So it becomes a kind of a detailed piece if someone was trying to do it or keep up with it themselves and understand what was happening behind the scenes.
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on everything that you guys just said. I do think that WooCommerce is going to be integrated with WordPress.com as kind of a software as a service, as a self-hosted, similar to Shopify. But I see that being more for people who just want to get started with e-commerce or have a very basic layout, because I think that transition is going to be able to truly customize a WooCommerce site. I don't see that transition being right away, being able to do that on self-hosted. I still think a lot of people, or I should say a hosted solution, excuse me. I do think that there's going to be a need for self-hosted because there are a lot of people that don't want it to look, like the basic WooCommerce layout. And for that, you're still going to need self-hosted. Everything that you're saying is stuff that I've encountered. E-commerce is so tricky because everything has to function together. The server, the plugins, WooCommerce itself, the payment gateways, all that has to work in coordination. And one little thing falls out of place, you need a developer. I've built varying sizes of WooCommerce sites. Some are really simple. They're just a couple products, basic shipping, pretty straightforward. Even setting that up though, you got to make sure your payment gateways are set, your SSL certificate is set, everything, email's working. That's just the most straightforward. But when you get into integrating different things like, say, like BuddyPress, or you're integrating like different payment gateways, or maybe your hosting isn't great. Things can go wrong. You got to like move it to SMTP. These things happen, and these things are happening to me like right now with different clients. And, I picked up a different client. They just had their site built by someone else, and they weren't super happy, so they ended that relationship. But they need somebody to maintain. Okay, let's look at what you need to update. And knowing from just updating like a bunch of other sites, it's like, okay, you got to get with your hosting company, upgrade your version of PHP. So that's one thing. You got to get like your, theme license from the person who just built it, because I think WooCommerce is like rolled into this particular theme. And then we're going to have to, get the licenses for all your extensions. And these are all things that you need a developer for. And maybe this like ties into like our main topic like later, but it's really easy to just throw something together and kind of kludge it together. But making sure that it's going to keep working like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, that takes a little bit more expertise. And I don't want to say most, but there are people out there that are not up to that challenge. And, that's what you need a developer for. So I think that subject is pretty much, that's could be like a whole subject in itself. So anyway, the last news topic, 5 challenges plaguing the WordPress security ecosystem. This was featured on Torque magazine. What were your guys' thoughts on this? Kim.
I thought, Tony was summing it up, and Tony's, of course, Sucuri, and that's the company I use and I recommend. And I think most of his stuff was spot on. It is still, a lot of it is, website owners who don't really understand it, who don't understand why it's important to keep it updated and that kind of thing. He was pointing the fingers at that. And Ollie did talk about how at least, WordPress has helped us with better passwords now, and they don't email the password to you, they email you a reset link, at least, so there was some positives. The biggest challenges I think talking about, was, we are playing more and more to a non-technical audience and how to educate them as to what's important.
What are your thoughts, Jackie?
He definitely, touched on the 5 points there that make a lot of sense. Everybody deals with clients where they send you these passwords and you're like, okay, it's just your company name with a exclamation point at the end or something simple like that. And, that's the first barrier that you're going in. But Tony mentioned something in there that I kind of didn't agree with on number 1, where he just said the platform by design is built for end users, which has directly contributed to WordPress's massive adoption and growth. I would argue that the platform by design is built for people who are implementing the site or building out the site. It's not necessarily designed for end users. If you take somebody that owns a pet store. Let's just say you're going to build a website for a pet store or something, or let's just not even do e-commerce. Let's just back it up. Okay, so you've got a dentist office, and they're just going to have just a straight up website. Managing that site, if you were to show somebody who's going to be in charge of writing and updating content on the site or blogging on the site, and you open up that dashboard and you first show it to them, my guess is they're going to be overwhelmed by that. And my idea, and Tanya Mork and I have been chatting about this quite a bit, and I envision a dashboard that maybe has 6 buttons on there for that person who is going to be using the site for content creation, right? That's the main focus of that. A site owner, somebody who's handling the administration and configuration, I think that all should be moved to some other area. Even if it's just a button on there that's administration and configuration, or it's actually a separate dashboard completely. But wouldn't it be nice if users could just open up something and had maybe 5 or 6 buttons that is upload media, write content, moderate comments, just simple things, because there's things that they would be going in there to do. I think it's just a huge landmine there for users. when they start moving around, because to me, there's not really a consistent order of really how things are presented. It's basically started off as a blog and everybody's been just adding on to it. And it, from somebody who's getting it today that has never seen it. And, you know, for us, it's easy. And if you listen to Morten Rand Hendrickson's talk on empathy, that was a total, applies to this situation where we see this every day, we use it every day, and to us, it's just normal, it's natural, this is how it is. But to somebody who's never used it before, I think it could be just overwhelming, and it's unnecessarily complicated. For somebody who's using WordPress to have to deal with all of the administration configuration settings and the customizer. Customizer is another great thing. That customizer is really for somebody who's implementing the site, who's making design changes to the site. It's not for somebody who's writing content. You're not going to go there when you're updating a blog post or writing new content or editing a page. And I just think, so I disagreed with that part in there, and I'm sure it wasn't intentional the way it was worded or anything, but it struck in my mind because I've been having these conversations a lot of it is difficult for somebody who's never seen it, and it doesn't make logical sense when you look at it from a user experience perspective. You know, it's just not laid out intuitively for somebody who has never seen it. So that's my comment on that. The rest of the stuff all totally makes sense, you know, about education and just making sure you keep things updated. And there are vulnerabilities there. They're all manageable, but it all goes back to if you are self-hosting and you either need to educate yourself if you're doing it yourself, or you need to get somebody to manage the website for you. And I think a lot of us do a disservice to clients when we're taking on a project that self-hosted WordPress may not be the best option for them. And I think a lot of times we make it the best option because that's what we do every day. So, you know, we build self-hosted sites and that's what we're selling, right? Or that's the service that we're doing. But I think it's time to dig deeper with some people and find out, is that really the best solution for them? Or is maybe a WordPress.com or some other alternative that is a hosted platform, like even a Squarespace or Wix or, you know, something like that, that might be easier to manage, that doesn't have all the maintenance issues that a site owner has. The worst situation I see is you build out a site, you hand it to them, and you never talk to them again. And I've got several clients that couldn't afford support, and their site I know hasn't been updated in a year, and it's a concern. And I kind of think in hindsight, maybe that wasn't a good choice for them. That's my whole take on that.
Yeah, that's a lot of take.
Sorry.
No, that's cool. So let me see if I can break all that down. It's the admin panel is like a little, it is overwhelming. Let's just say it is. If you're a site owner, you're an administrator, and you know, unless you have the person specifically set you up as like an editor, say I'm building you a site. I usually try and do that, you know, like you're an editor, so you can't break anything, but invariably, you know, there'll be something where I need to set them up as admin. There's kind of like no in between. So it's like you see everything, or you just see what you need to, you know, create stuff. Here's another thing that's like really difficult about this is every site is a little bit different, because when you add a plugin, like it adds stuff to the menu, and say if you've got a theme, like every theme is different, unless you're, you know, building your own, and so those add stuff to them. So every single configuration of WordPress is pretty much unique, and I think that makes it a little bit more difficult. So, you know, what are your thoughts as far as like educating clients? What do you guys do to, you know, tell them like, hey, don't use like password is like your password? I still see people, you know, do that, and you know. What's your thoughts on that? How much effort do you put into like educating the clients, like when you're building a site and maintaining the site?
Since all I do is education, that's all I do. You know, people who come to me are either someone who a site has been built for and they want to maintain it themselves, or 90% of the time people come to me because they want to build it themselves. So they're an entrepreneur, they want to build it themselves, they want to learn the nitty-gritty, and so, yeah, they just have to be educated. Is it complex? Is it a little confusing at first? Yes, we just dig into that and get through. that piece. And, then it's just hammering home that you have to keep it up to date, that you don't want to just run out there and put in every plugin known to man, that you have to ask some smart questions of your web host. And these are what those questions are. And, so it's, mine is just specifically the education and helping people understand that, yes, there's some complexity here, but at the same time, there's a power that, for the first time, when I started in 1995, I could not teach my 71-year-old mother how to build a website. Wasn't going to happen. Front page wasn't even out yet. Now I have 60 and 70-year-olds building their sites, working on it, taking the effort. And so I still think that what we've got now is really just an awesome, democratization of the internet and people being able to build their platform there.
Okay. Well, we're about due for a break, so we're going to come back with the main topic, which is evaluating WordPress developer, company, maintenance service, designer. So we'll see you after the commercial. All right, we're back, and we're talking the main topic. How do you, say you're a business owner, you want to hire someone to build your site or maintain your site. How do you evaluate them? So let's start with some criteria. What, say you're a business owner, you're starting. How would you start searching? Do you just start Googling people and just looking at stuff, or how do you reach out to people? How do you compile a list?
Are you talking about, so we're talking from a perspective of somebody who's looking for a developer or for a service company, or because I think there would be differences.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about like the differences, say if you're just hiring a single person or a service company.
Okay. If I'm looking for one, of course you're going to probably do some Google research and start searching to see what's going on. I would then check social media too, I think is another place to see if the persons that you're finding on Google search that you're interested in, see what kind of social presence they've got, and then start evaluating what's on their website, what's their message, and what is it that they do. A lot of them, you see a lot of sites, they don't look finished. They don't look like they put much effort into the content. So if you're interested in having a really content-rich website, maybe that's not the person that you'd want to be working with on that project. You might be somebody who's really focused on branding and content strategy and are using a lot of those words on their website. So I think it all rolls back to, for me, is what is it that I want to do first? Try to make a decision about what it is, what do I need? And then start seeing if I can find someone who aligns with what it is I'm looking for versus just, because here's a good example. Say you're an awesome web designer, you do a bunch of work for rock bands, right? Okay. And I'm a dentist, okay? And I'm looking for a website. You may not be the best choice for working with me on that project. I mean, that person's got a niche and they have a whole flow of how they're doing things. That might not be a great fit, but you might find another developer that's had, done a lot of medical practice websites or works with attorneys and does a lot of attorney websites, has knowledge about how to effectively build SEO for them and those types of things. And if that's something you're looking for, then trying to find people who maybe fit the niche that you're looking for would be a good starting point.
So definitely what you're saying is like specific is better than general. What are your thoughts on that? Jackie and then Kim.
Well, it depends on the size of the project, right? So if you're going to be doing some very, very large project and you go to a 10 Up or one of the other big names that are in our space to do work, they may not they have specific niches within their organization that could help you. But I think if you're a smaller organization looking to do something, then you definitely would want to align with people. Go look at competitors' sites that you're competing with, or people that are in your industry. See who built their sites, talk to them, see if they were happy with it. Are they still happy with it if time has gone by? That would be a good place to do some research there. So in that case, I think being specific is still better.
What are your thoughts on that, Kim? Do people generally hire like companies that are more specific rather than like generalized?
I think it depends. I think Jackie's right. If you know you're in a specific niche and you've got somebody who specializes in that, it's a great place to go. Particularly, like, I love when you mentioned dentists, right? If you're talking local business versus global business, those can be very different websites and structured differently. So if I'm a local dentist, I may want to look at who is doing the other local sites, even if they're not dentists, right? Exactly. But the guy up on my street, and he's getting him, that psychologist down the street, but he's getting him that local flair and that local traffic, that may be where I want to go. Otherwise, yeah, like you mentioned, if some guy's doing a rock band and that's what he focuses on, and everything's really, really edgy because it's all rock stuff. And then, or let's go even worse, he does heavy metal bands. Right?
Oh, that's the best.
Yeah, but if you're the marriage counselor down the block, that might not be the right look and feel for what you're going for, unless you're a marriage counselor for metal bands. There's probably a really good niche there. I don't know.
That's probably an excellent one.
But I absolutely agree with Jackie. And I think also, if you're hiring someone, I used to have a program because I used to work with a lot of people looking for that. And I had a program called How to Hire a Web Developer Without Losing Your Shirt, Soul, or Sanity. And it was those kinds of things. And one of the things is figure out your own requirements. Are you looking, like when you mentioned content, Jackie, some people come and they're like, I have all this content. I'm a great content creator. I need a site developer and a branding person to help me get this into an online platform that's going to serve me. Some people don't even know what content needs to go on their site. And that might be a different developer that works well with them. So they need to know their requirements so that they can talk to the developer about, or the company or whoever, about, these are going to be my needs. And of course, if you're just looking for the cheapest, then just quit worrying about this and find the cheapest, and you're not going to be happy. Let's just set the bar right there.
For sure. And I like how you say, and you're not going to be happy, because that's usually what happens, right? So Jonathan, our co-host, my co-host Jonathan, is coming in from the chat room, and he says, I think a good point is using freelancer or an agency that specializes in WordPress rather than an agency or freelancer that uses a number of different platforms. What does the panel think about this? What do you think, Jackie?
I agree. I think it's better to go with somebody who specializes in WordPress, if that's what you're going to do. Now, if you don't even know that you want WordPress yet, say you're somebody who you decide, okay, I'm an attorney. I need a website for my business. We've got 3 attorneys here. We're growing. We need, maybe they had a little plain page, static page website or something, and now they want a real website. So whether or not WordPress is right for them, you have to ask some questions. So they need to. That's the job of when you're interviewing clients, right? And you're talking to clients about a project, you can help them determine whether or not WordPress is a good fit for them based on the questions that you're going to be asking them. Because if they don't plan on updating content on their site, and they don't plan on writing any blog posts, and they don't plan on doing anything, well, then maybe a 5-page Bootstrap template might be better for them to do. Throw something up that's easy to edit from a developer's end, right? So that you could, and they're going to pay you to just make updates to it a couple of times a year for them. That might make a lot of sense, has a lot less overhead to managing. You don't have to worry about updates and all of the other things that are going to go with that. So deciding whether, once you've decided WordPress is right for them. So let's say, okay, oh no, we've got somebody here in our office, they want to write content every week, and we really want to focus on building a local business and get local SEO and get in the search engines for local searches. Well, then that opens up the door. Yeah, so WordPress is probably a really good solution for them there. So once you've done that, then you can decide what the next steps are going to be.
So definitely. So what's your thoughts on that, Kim, as far as say just determining like whether what platform do they even need? Do they even know?
Well, I don't think they should have to know. I mean,
Yeah.
Granted, if they've come and they know they want WordPress, let's talk. That may be a different discussion. But I would more talk to them on how often they're going to update. Are we going to do a blog, etc. Having said that, if this is not a mom blogger, if this is not someone who's just doing this for fun, and it truly is a business, and they have any idea that their business is going to bring them, their online presence is going to bring them business, I'm going to say, you probably do need something built out like your own WordPress site, and you're going to have to blog or do some kind of content updates this often, because otherwise it's just a calling card online. And when you're doing the Wix and all of that, it is much, much harder to build any online presence that comes through there other than just sending it out to people as a business card. And that's fine if that's what you're looking for. But I really, when I worked with people like that, and even when I work with people coming to me as students, it's like, these are the hard facts. If you're going to build it, this is what you need to do. And if you want any chance of that being traffic builder for you, this is what you need to do. So that's where I would say, from the structure of, do they need a WordPress or do they need something else? If you're going to hire someone for WordPress, I do think it's smart to go with someone who specializes in WordPress. But I'm going to take the next hard question too. And I am going to ask about their technical background. It's one of the issues you do have, like with some of the security stuff, right? I started out as a systems person long before WordPress. I mean, I started out in 1989, 90 doing system administration and stuff. We didn't even have, we were on CompuServe accounts, okay? Whole different life. Sometimes some of these things with picking the host and configuring hosts for people and all, it is because someone came and they took my level of WordPress class, which I love, and I love my students, but you don't leave my level of WordPress class ready to say you're a developer for other people, because you just still don't have enough knowledge. So I would want to dig in a little bit more with them on what that technical and WordPress experience was, to see if they were really someone I want to hire.
So what are your thoughts on that, Jackie? Like, what kind of questions should they be asking someone that they're looking to hire, like the businesses? Should they be asking them technical questions? Should they be asking them about their experience? What sort of questions should they have on their shortlist?
Well, and I think based on what it is they need first. So it depends on what kind of a site they need and whether or not they think they're going to need custom functionality in the site, because that draws the line, just like Kim was saying, which was really great, because there's a lot of people who are really good at implementation. So you can pick a theme, they can get it set up for you, they can get the images, the colors, and get everything done great. Then there's another person that you would need if you needed to build out some custom functionality that didn't exist, or that required some modifications to a plugin, or some, extensive changes throughout. That would involve some more planning to see, because I've done some recent projects where, I had to do a lot of custom coding to get the results that the client needed. It's not something that was available in a plugin. It wasn't something that it was a special situation. So and a client may not know that, which goes back to that whole point. That is, when you are interviewing someone, right, for as a developer, you're trying to find somebody, see what kind of questions they're asking you, because if they're asking you those types of questions where they're probing to find out what functionality you need, what do you need the site to do, why do you need a website right now, why are you doing this right now, what's the reasoning behind it, and really, like Curtis McHale is really good about helping people understand that, drilling down and getting answers to some really common questions that should help frame the scope of the project. And then you'll have a better understanding about who's a good person for that. If through those conversations you realize that you just need a basic site and it's going to be pretty easy, well then, then you can take your pick of people that you want to work with. The other thing is see how you interact with that developer or designer. I mean, because a lot of times that can be the breaking point in those relationships as they go, is there may have been signals in the beginning that wasn't really a good fit, and it just gets magnified over time as you go. John and I were talking last week about content, and this would probably be a good point to bring this up and to just say this, because I think it's really good, is I'm really rethinking my entire workflow with a client. And it started as a conversation that we had about getting all the content together before we start the project. And that, to me, makes a lot of sense in several ways. One, it gets you a nice, close building relationship with your client at the beginning of the project versus at the end. Because if you notice, typical projects, you start doing your design, you start doing your mock-ups, you do all of those things, and the client's not really participating very much. They're giving feedback when you throw up something on a staging server or say, hey, have a look at these mock-ups, have a look at this. But it doesn't start until you get ready to start integrating all the content. And I'm not just assuming that this is a new client, they don't have a site yet. If they've already got a WordPress site and you're, they already have content, well, then it's a good time to go through all that content with them at the beginning of the project. Not say, oh yeah, well, we'll deal with that all later. Let me get all the structure done and then we'll figure out where we're putting everything. To me, it seems like the opposite way would be much more efficient. It would also help with discovery about what is really needed. If you're thinking about doing a site and the menu has 6 items and you get down the road and you're almost done with the project and the client goes, oh yeah, but we also have this other stuff that we wanted to do and these other things. And now that completely skews your entire design. You've got to go back because you didn't scope that part out. And I think we were talking about this idea and I was like, I think I'm going to really try this. I'll just throw up a plain Genesis framework sample theme and get the content loaded in there with the client's images and, what stock images, whatever we were going to use, with all of that information. Get that in there and just look at the content versus the web design or anything else. And then from there, go and build this out. Because then you've got, first of all, you'll understand their business a lot better if you're going through all the content with them. And if they have an existing site, it's a great time to weed out content that they don't need or see what needs to be changed. And then I think it'll make it much easier and it'll be a lot less iterations of designing and building it out if you're relying at the end of the project, and we all know how this goes. Client doesn't get you the content. They're dragging their feet. Then you start to say, well, do you have any images you can use instead of us getting them? Or then then they just start sending you blocks of text and expect you to format them all and kind of make it all flow and work. And there's not much thought into that. So if you're looking at content on a site that has no design yet to it, you can really look at all the content and see, okay, well, what's the message here? What's the value? What's your branding? How is this going to help? And I think building out your site might be easier. It's certainly worth a try, I think.
What are your thoughts on this, Kim?
100%. I love the way you put that, Jackie. 100%. I mean, face it, we are all talking about content marketing. We need the content. And you're right. It's that sometimes it can be that's what they've put off. And now you're trying to launch the site and you don't have the content. And I mean, even with my students. So when I work with my students, most of my students take my 8 hours or less course, which means at the end of the first class, they're going to have that basic 5-page site with a contact form and all, and a calendar for how they're going to do their blog posts. That's how my students normally roll. But that's the very first one, we talk about the planning the site, and then it is their homework to go develop that content before we actually start plugging it in, because I can't teach you to plug anything in until we have it. And I think if you're building it out as a service provider, a developer, absolutely, that's going to let you really see what they're trying to do. Because a lot of times when I used to work with clients, what they were explaining they wanted to do and what you actually saw, what they brought you, it was like architects and engineers. It didn't go together all the time. So
No,
I spot on, Jackie.
I totally feel you on that. The content really is it's the foundation of like everything that you're doing. Without the message in place, anything else that we do is really not going to be effective. You know, when you close your eyes and you look at the site, and if you just look at the headlines, you should be able to get the context of what the site is. But for whatever reason, I think a lot of developers, agencies, we put this off until the last second, or or we don't do this first. We figure we can do the design part and the development part, and the content will just kind of show up at the last. But what ends up happening is the project gets delayed by months, and then it just keeps going, and it never gets launched. And then the last day, you're throwing everything in there.
Exactly. So wouldn't it be amazing if the whole scope of the project required the content to be ready before the next phase began? So that would make life so much better. And I think it would help people just really understand what it was their message was. What did they want to say? I think a lot of times they don't know. And I think if a client can't write an about page, just an about us page, right? And if you can't as a developer, if that's not your skill set and you're not really good at that, then partner with somebody who's really good at content creation and sell that as part of your service to do the build out, so that you can say, don't worry, I have somebody who will interview you, talk with you, and then they'll put together all of this content. And then that may be the first phase you do. You get them to do that, build out all the content. Once you've got all this content, it makes it so much easier to design it. First of all, if you've got all the images first, you can get a better idea of the feel for it. If you know how I design, I kind of I want to make sure that my images and everything kind of really mesh well with the whole overall look and feel of a site. Well, if you're going and hunting for images at the end of the project to fill in, then you're going back to your style sheet and tweaking colors and making changes because, oh, well, this image really isn't going to look good here with these font colors or these background colors. And I think it's just, to me, it just seems like it makes so much more sense. And I don't know why I haven't been doing that earlier on and just looking at it. It just seemed like everybody else was doing it this way, so we all do it that way. But it seems like it'd be just really an awesome experiment to just say, okay, well, we're going to do this project. Let's gather all our content first, and then let's go pick out all our images that we're going to be using. And then once you've got the content, and then you can start structuring how many pages you're going to need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So okay, here's all the pages. What images are going on what pages, and you throw that up into a sample theme just to have a look at all the stuff. I think maybe even getting some design ideas might come a lot easier when you have something visual to look at. Never mind the fact that, you could design something for a spot and then they come back with content that takes up twice the amount of space. And now you're like, well, this is skewing my whole design, or the wording is throwing off all my footers because there's too many words in this footer line. And, then you know exactly what I'm saying. So, but I do think that if you had all of that information up front, you'd have a better relationship with your client. You would bond much earlier in the process and kind of gently weaning off at the end instead of just the opposite, where they're saying, okay, well, go off and do your work and then let me know when you're ready. And, slowly but surely, little by little, you get to the point where you are ready to bring in the content. And then you're having a frenzy working with the client. And that's where all of the difficulties come, I think, because no one's prepared.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jackie. John dropped out. He'll come back, I guess.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree. With letting them know, though, one thing I always did let them know is one of the beauties with the internet is the site's never done. So let's get that first 5, 10, whatever pages. But you always need to be adding to your site. That's just part of where we are in the internet now. So, but I would definitely do that. For one, something I wasn't even thinking of because I don't do that type of work anymore. But when you brought it up with, if you have the images and you have the text, you have the content, you have everything else, it's going to let you have a site that's fully branded properly, right? If your content is written in this airy, fairy, sweet, wonderful, oxygen network type of text, right? And yet your colors are red, black, and, super bold. Do they go together? And on the other hand, if your content is the way I tend to write, which is very bold, and all of a sudden you've got these little airy fairy green and yellow flowers, it's not going to fit. So it's going to help you as a designer, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And that's, that I lost my train of thought there. I'm sorry. I'll just go ahead. I'll think of it in a second. I'll think of it a second.
Okay, we're going to go to a break really quick, and I think that we're not going to go too much longer on the main show, but then we can continue. But we're going to go to a break. All right, and we're back, and we're discussing how do you best evaluate a WordPress developer company, maintenance service. Who are you hiring? And we're talking about like content. And here's a question I want to pose to Jackie really quick. So a lot of people, business owners are choosing, they don't know how to choose a WordPress, company or a freelancer. I've had people ask really weird questions like, do you have a day job? Is this your side job? Is this your full-time job? I get that a lot, actually, because I think a lot of people, it's kind of like their side gig, I guess. But say you're an average business owner, say you're, not looking to spend like, $50,000 on a site. So you're not going to hire like, necessarily like an agency, but maybe, a 1 or 2 person team. How do you evaluate people when it comes to like a process and the content? Because I think that people are used to one type of process, or they, whatever process their last person, used. How do you deal with it? I think, when people like push back and say, no, this is what we want this process to be.
They may not be the right client for me to work with at that point. I have to really look and see exactly, if it's something I'm going to be willing to do, if it makes sense. I'm certainly not going to do a project that's going to turn out poorly, and kind of knowing that up front. And it might be better to just send them somewhere else.
Yeah, kind of my thoughts as well. But as far as that, like Kim, have you ever, as far as that, what do you look for when clients are trying to hire you? I mean, as far as that, are they going to be, follow your process or, I think it varies, but, the people you talk to.
So yes, when I actually did work for people, I have had a detailed planning document and process that had to be followed. And sometimes that just determined that they weren't the right client for me. They would look at it and go, well, I don't have time to sit down and tell you all this. Well, I don't have time to make your site. So I did have a very detailed planning guide, and similar as an instructor, I have here's the class, here's the syllabus, here's what we're going to do, and here's what you're going to commit to. And if that's too much planning for you, then I'm not even the right instructor for you or the right coach.
All right, Jonathan Denwood is joining us, my beloved co-host.
You did great. You did great, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I agree with a lot of what Jackie said. I just don't think it's really difficult to find a optimized process. I think one of the things, Jackie, it's over a year ago. It was from the same area as John from Sacramento, the Bournes. They produced a lot about their process where they sent a lot of drip email, and where they kept the client informed, but they weren't having to send all the email themselves. And they've got some interesting posts on their web, haven't they, John?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and
Yes.
I think it's really important to have, a set process to where, you are guiding the project and it's a repeatable thing. It's not something you're making up, kind of on the fly, like each time. It's definitely like a big part of having a successful project is knowing, how the whole process is going to go and following it step by step. I think to kind of wrap up the main show, let's ask like one more question, and this I'm going to pose it to Jackie and then Kim. And then Jonathan, how much should potential clients be looking at what other people are saying about the person that they're going to hire? Should you be looking at reviews? Should you be looking at what people in your industry are saying? Should you be looking at Yelp, Google, or just publications about them? Where do you go look to find out if this person is reputable or not, or if they're just, talking hot air? Jackie.
Well, I'm sorry. I think if they have an online presence and they are, active in the community, that's really a good sign that they're engaged in the community and they're part of the solution, I guess, and trying to help other people. And, maybe if they contribute some of their time to help others, and maybe if they write like you do, John, you do a really great job. You write a lot of great blog posts on your site that help people. And I think that's a good sign if that's what you're looking for. Not to say that there aren't some fantastic people who choose not to do those things, and put out really great work. So testimonials are, nobody's going to put a bad testimonial on their website. So I would look at that with a grain. It's almost like, well, at least there are some people that have said nice things about you, so that's okay. But I wouldn't use that as my only gauge for that. More so, first of all, make sure that, if they have a portfolio on their website, does it align with what it is you're interested in doing? So like I was saying earlier, if somebody told you this person's great, they're awesome, and you go and all they're doing is rock bands and you're trying to open a dentist office, they may be great at it, but they just may not have the skills to help you effectively get your message out. It just may not be the right fit there. So more so, does it align with what it is that you want to do? So do they have a portfolio on their site? Is their site finished? Just look for simple things like that. And then when you do contact them, how do they want to communicate? Do they answer you within a day, or does it take a week before you get an answer back? Some of those are good things to look out for, red flags that might be an issue. And when you first talk to them, what kind of questions are they asking you? Are they interested in learning really specifics about your project, or do they just want to give you a price for a website, take it or leave it, and don't worry, we'll get it all worked out once we get started? That's a red flag to me, because there's going to be problems then. It's much better if you ask questions in the beginning. Somebody in my position, I really want to understand why somebody wants a website. What's the purpose of it? What are their expectations? What's the ROI that they're looking to get on this? Because when you're selling it, it's an investment. And if they're trying to get the cheapest thing possible, okay, if you've got time in your schedule and you want to do that, that's perfectly fine to do it. But understanding where they're coming from and what their goals are. And if what their goals are and what their budget is doesn't really align, you're not doing them a service unless you explain that to them. You really do need to do that.
Donald Brandt in the chat room says, I give the developers some simple tasks before I let them work for me. And the reason for that is one developer had high prices but low quality sites. I think that's a really good idea too, is doing a small project. And then if the communication is good, the process is good, the chemistry is good, and everything works correctly, then move on to like a bigger project. Kim, as far as that, like reputation, as far as doing some sort of small project first, is that a good way to start?
I like the small project. If you have something small you can give them, I think that's great. One thing that I had a lot when I did work with that was, if it's a local developer, is, get out there and a lot of times if you're not going to online and picking people through Google that you don't actually know, a lot of times if you're a small business, you're actually finding someone in the local community. Ask around. A lot of times you can talk to people that are not on their website, right? Not on their testimonials, but find out not just what the quality of was, but was it done on time and how responsive were they? There was once upon a time I got a lot of business because some developers they'd take everybody's money and then they'd disappear. And maybe it would get done over time, but they weren't even responding to phone calls and that type of thing. So especially if you're dealing with a small local developer and you can ask locally, find out, particularly how responsive were they, and did the site, if you gave them the content, that part's on you. If you got the content to them, did they actually get it back to you on time? Or 3 months later, were you still sitting there saying, hey, where are we with this website?
No, and
I think that.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that's great, Kim. I really. I feel sorry for people really because I think it's an extremely difficult situation. I know a few local agencies that that are really great at PR and print, but they're not really that great when it comes to web development. And reality, they're farming out most of the work to freelancers like John, like Jackie, and they're basically marking up by over 50%. But it just goes with the territory, doesn't it? It's just a fact of the industry. It's freelancer, it's subcontracted based industry. So after to go to agency, you really don't know who really is doing the work. It's just a very difficult situation.
I think that's a really intriguing thing, and that's something we didn't really talk about. There are like a lot of agencies that are maybe good at print, or they're good at maybe like pay-per-click, and they also kind of sell websites on the side, but maybe generally speaking, they just hire like the local college kid to do it, and you don't maybe know actually who's doing the work. So that might be a good question to ask as far as who's actually doing the work. And something that the panel said before as well, what is their expertise? Is it really web design, or is it just print, and they kind of do web design on also do that? So as Jonathan, as far as like when you've hired developers in the past, how do you evaluate their reputation? Do you kind of Google stuff? Do you find out? Because I find that a lot of local business owners, and nothing against them, but I think this happens a lot, it's just whoever they meet at the local chamber of commerce. Okay, you can do my site, or whoever comes up in Google, okay, you can do my site, and they kind of don't dig deeper and find these red flags that maybe do exist. How do you evaluate the people you hire?
I think for those type of clients, it's extremely difficult. I think what Jackie said, and also Kim, I would just try and have a couple of small jobs and updates for my website, have a small brief to do some updating, and see how responsive that person is in attitude. Do they answer their phone call? Do they answer their email? I've been trying to hire, I'm not going to go in detail, but John knows, I've been trying to hire somebody to do a Pacific service, and they're not even answered the email. They're not even, I've had a couple of people not even answer when I've left a voice message. They don't even call back when it's even a new job. I think I'm trying to find the right words here. It's a very diverse industry, but you'd be surprised the number of people that don't respond to email, don't even respond to a voicemail.
No, I definitely think.
I don't think you should.
Oh yeah, I definitely. You
shouldn't hide. You shouldn't hide those people.
I definitely think in web design, web development, that is like a very low bar that anybody that is responsive and communicates with their clients, you're going to get work, because what I found is probably like 75% of my work, the clients that I have now have had a bad experience before, and it's just, if you respond to them and communicate with them and just, are honest with them, you're already ahead of like tons of people. So
yeah, because it's very similar if you are hiring an electrician or a plumber, or look, I'm not an electrician. I have no capacity to tell you if an electrician is doing a good job or a bad job. I don't know. I couldn't look at the work and tell you, is that guy done a load of shortcuts? Has he bodged all this up? Because all he cares about is getting the job done as quickly as possible and making as much money out of the job as possible. And it's the same with website development. A normal person, how they would have no clue looking at the site or the code. Are you a total bodger, or are you somebody that has some reasonable standards? They have no capacity to make that kind of judgment call. So like me, they would go by how responsive that person is. Do they give me options? Is there problems? How do they deal with the problems? Do I get a bad feeling about their attitude? It's kind of soft things, because I wouldn't be able to judge their electrical work.
No, you can't really, you can't, and that is difficult. And that's why I'm asking that, as far as like, reputation and explaining process and all that, all those things. Because again, like if people who are hiring like Kim or Jackie or myself or you, they don't really know how to evaluate. And that's why I thought this episode would be like helpful, is because a lot of people just don't know how to make that decision. They usually go by, just price, or, hey, like that's a person who came up, or like somebody recommended that person and they could totally botch the job, or they might do good. I mean, it's really a crapshoot. You don't know.
Well, it's even worse than that, because I know a local company that's highly recommended by a number of people in this area, and I know that they're total bodgers, but they're very, very good at their PR. They're extremely good about building up local relationships and their PR. But I know, because I've worked for them, and I know that they're total bodgers. That
another point too that I was going through on my end is when you're talking to developers, if they're not bringing up to you that a lot of the plugins that you're going to be using are all third-party plugins, and that you need to be aware that the way you get your website today may not stay that way, because it's dependent on a lot of moving parts that you don't have control over. And you need to really explain that to clients, and you need to ask, like, what are you going to do? How are you going to build my website? What tools are you going to install? What plugins are you going to install? Are they premium ones? Am I going to have to, is this a recurring payment that I have to pay every year? And if not, and a lot of them will go, well, there's free ones out there, we can get them for you. They may be poorly coded. And they may become obsolete, they may be abandoned, they may not work anymore. So when you're building out a site, one of the things I even put in my contract at the end is, these things I don't have control over. You need to be aware that this is where this functionality on your website came from, because they'll look at you later like, well, you built it. And you may not have built everything that have control over, and you may not, unless you want to adopt that plugin and fix it yourself. There may be challenges going forward with that. And I think a good developer will be somebody who explains those things to clients when you make those choices. Like, how many plugins do you really need? And every time you add one, you need to be aware that this plugin may not be updated anymore. Something may occur, and you need to be prepared to make changes in the future.
I so agree with that. And also, even like a person should ask, like you said, what are you building this with, and what are my ongoing costs going to be? Because, for example, some of those, back when I built sites, some of those WooCommerce sites that I built for people, there was $600 or $700 a year in extensions they had to have. Now I let them know that, but if your developer's not letting you know that, you know, it should be something. It is something you might want to start asking in the conversation if you're doing this. The other thing with that is I would highly be cautious of developers that insist that they do all of your hosting for you. Because as developers, I get why it's nice to have your own systems and stuff, but I have seen so many people hijacked by unethical developers where, yeah, really? Because it's on my server now. How you think you're going to get it? Because of some issue between the two. So I tend to recommend to people, register your own domain name and have your own web host. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to always get to have the $3 a month web host and have it function right. Listen to your developer, respect them, and get a level of hosting that they recommend. But I would not turn my stuff over to them to put on their servers and have control over. That's a red flag for me.
I definitely recommend, a few hosts to clients and then give them choices on which ones they want. And if they want to use a host I'm not familiar with, there may be additional costs for my time on that. So I can say, here's ones I'm familiar with. I know how to get in there and get things set up for you. So that's included in the price we're talking about. If you've got some other hosts that you want to use, there will be, an extra charge for doing that. So then this way they've got the freedom to pick the one that they want, but at least it's ones that I'm comfortable working in.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And I would add to it if they wanted one of those other ones. I even do this when we teach. When we teach, I'm going to teach this and this is what it's going to look like. And if you're doing something else, one, you may have to call your host about some of this because it may not look right or act right. And two, it may not perform well. And if it doesn't, don't look at me because I don't know what you're picking.
Some of them aren't even on even remotely updated PHP version. You'll find these things out later on. You're like, I did one not too long ago. I did some updates on a client site and that was an issue for them. They weren't even. And so when these other plugins they got, well, they wouldn't run on the version of PHP that their host was on. And it ends up taking a lot of support time. And if you're not building that into the cost of delivering that product to the client, they need to be aware that, if you're asking me to go to uncharted territory to work, then there's going to be additional expenses involved with that.
Yep,
No,
so
I agree.
true.
Well, I think that's a great point, Jackie. I'll tell you, I've been supporting a non-profit website for a few years, and I've built the site for them. And there's some plugins there, and I'll tell you, the hosting provider, it's GoDaddy. And they went with GoDaddy, and I told them from day one not to go with them. And they've got the domain, they wanted everything simple, so fair enough. And so these plugins won't work now. And I said, you've got to have, they've got no effective email support. You've got to ring them up. So they run them up. They spent like an hour and a half waiting for their call to be answered, and they gave up. And now every time I do anything on this site, they send me an email like somehow it's my fault. And I haven't got 2 hours of my life to spend with GoDaddy. So it's up to them to call them because they got everything done for free, Jackie.
Yeah.
And I can't spend 2
No,
hours
and
on
that's
the phone.
exactly that's the issue there. When you're being asked to work in an environment that you're not comfortable with, or that you definitely think is going to be challenging, then that needs to be priced into your product. You need to be clear up front when you're talking with clients in the beginning. Here's the hosting choices I recommend. If you're not going to go with one of those, then there'll be a separate estimate for working on that host for you. And that's got to be that's there. So I'm not deploying it on there unless it's that you pay that up front. So just, there it goes. I just did that last week, actually.
I won't work with a client that insists on go. No, a lot of people in the community have got a very different position. It's only mine. It's fair. I just won't work with a client that insists that site's got to be on GoDaddy. And there's a couple of others that I'm not too keen on. But GoDaddy, I just won't deal with them when it comes to hosting. I've just got better things with my time.
It's not a project I would do either. I wouldn't take it at all.
Sorry, Code.
So definitely.
Well, they're not going to be. They're not going to be.
No, they're not. They're not calling you, Jonathan, to be. No, it's not happening.
So I mean, definitely. So that is the thing. Like, you know, perhaps like the best. You know, a good sign would be like your developer, your agency, your maintenance company, whoever. They're not just going to be a yes person and tell you like, yes, you can do everything that you want to for no money per month. They're going to give you like good suggestions that you should probably follow, because I mean, if you've, you know, got somebody good, they're going to, you know, they're going to listen to you. They're going to ask Socratic questioning, you know, keep digging deeper, ask questions. They're going to have a process, and they're going to give you like great suggestions for like hosting, and, you know, have a plan for implementing, like, you know, if there's plugins or whatever, they're going to recommend ones that are going to be supported in a year or two. And, you know, perhaps if you need custom development, they can do that too, or at least, you know, have access to someone who can. So those are all definitely things to look for. And they have a track record of success. I mean, you know, that's pretty important. So I think that we have covered this subject, you know, how to evaluate someone and hire them pretty extensively. So everybody, tell us how you can get a hold of you. Kim, how do people get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me at either @Kim Shivler on Twitter or howtobuildanonlinecourse.com.
Cool. Jackie, how do people get a hold of you?
You can find me on my website at jackiedelia.com or on Twitter at jdelia. And I'm pretty active on Twitter, so I'm sure you'll find me if you're there.
Jonathan, how do people get a hold of you, my beloved co-host?
I best get me on Twitter at Jonathan Denwood. I do monitor it, and I do reply to people, which is amazing. It's amazing about the people that don't reply to anything on Twitter.
And you can get a hold of me at my site, lockdowndesign.com. I'm on Twitter as lockdown_. And if you're in the Sacramento area, this is going to be a cheap, shameless plug. If you live anywhere near Sacramento, vote for me at the sacramento.cityvoter.com, best local blogger. I am trying to win. So there you go.
Can people outside of that area vote?
Probably, but they might flag it. They might flag it as being outside the area. So I'm just trying to be safe and get people to vote inside the area.
Good luck, John. Good luck.
Yeah,
you do a fantastic job of marketing yourself, so I can't see why you wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
They tried to take me down this, like yesterday. I had to argue with them. They're like, you're a web design business. And I said, that's weird, because, you know, here's my stats of, you know, people who come to my site, and, you know, here's all these other businesses that are in there that have blogs. Are you going to take them out too? And they said, well, we decided to reinstate you for a little bit. So there you go. They're going to decide internally, because I think that is the thing. There's a lot of like, and I said like the rules are not clear. It's not just mommy blogs or, you know, food blogs or whatever. So there's lots of businesses that blog. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but we got a question, because I don't know. You recorded the first part, didn't you? And then I think you finished recording on Blab now. But I think we had a question about smartphones, pixelated or murky. If not edited or optimized, they look okay on the phone. And I think that's really linked to our last podcast, wasn't it, John? About, you know, how you deal with images from smartphones and then import them in your library, isn't it?
You want me to stop this recording now? Are we done?
Yeah.
Okay, we're done. Okay.
Daphne and I were having kind of a sidebar chat